the level of return on investment is going to be over the long term for the investments that the capital expenditure investments that the utilities are going to make. And I think the government has been relatively consistent about what the goals are, and they've raised quite a bit of capital through the privatization process. So Turkey is another good example to take a look at. This slide right here is what I call the thermometer of privatization and regulatory reform. It's a very long word or a long set of words to describe these things that I see that are very important, that we've seen worldwide. They're consistent things that are very important for the market to be able to provide in order to have a successful transition from a highly regulated nationalized market to a privatized market that really provides capital to make these things happen. I'm not going to read through all of these. I'm sure you can see them on the screen. What I would say is that none of them are more important than the other. And that if you can move forward on as much of them as quickly as possible and not try to get too caught up in making everything perfect, it's better to make progress and do it in a deliberate way in all of them at the same time than it is to try to get stuck in one particular category. So that is my slideshow, and that's my presentation. If anybody has some questions, I'm presuming the conference people who are running this program will allow me to know that there are questions. Otherwise, thank you very much. I appreciate the time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Foch. And forgive me, I apologize. I thought you were in the United States. I didn't realize you were a little bit closer to us in Turkey. I suspect we will all agree that was a more concise and very good presentation that sort of took us round and give us a clear picture of what could possibly be happening in other markets as opposed to Nigeria.
Mr. Chairman, the fellow panelists, distinguished participants at the 7th Lagos Economic Summit, I want to say good morning to everybody. And I brought to you fraternal greetings from Nigeria Labour Congress, of which I'm the Vice President. I brought to you fraternal greetings, and in particular to the Lagos State Government and the organizers of this summit. First, we are excited in NSC that at this critical time in our national development, in which the public stories now are all about violence, about avoidable killings, I think Lagos State Government is changing the narrative of Nigeria for better with this summit. Because I think our preoccupation should be about government, about governance. It's about value addition. And I think this summit has come at a very handy time for us to face the real challenge of development. And we are far more excited that since yesterday, I watched live the opening ceremony of this program in Kaduna, where I'm based, and I was quite really moved to see some of those good statistics that are coming out of this summit. It's very remarkable that since 2008, or between 2008 and this year, 2014, there are just 6 years of this summit. Out of close to 77 resolutions, if I get it right, up to 72 resolutions, have been carried out, have been realized. For me, that shows that Nigeria, we are not just capable of, talking, but I think we can also walk our talk. And I'm excited about that. And as a member or as a delegate of the ongoing national conference in Abuja, I think I will try and make a point on the floor of the conference that if Lagos has done it, then we too must be able to do it for the country as a whole. Because our problem has always been with implementation. We have a series of resolutions, and then we return back the following year to have serial resolution with the implementation. I think Lagos has shown that it can be done. We can actually walk our talk. And I'm even far more impressed with some of those initiatives that have been carried out here in terms of electricity, and I would like to reflect on that much more later. The second quick remark I want to make, And I think I have to do this in deference to the chairman of the panel, because he posed a question to the comrade president, former president of Georgia. I think I can call you a comrade, coming from the old Georgia, which used to be part of our dream state, the old communist arrangement. I think you should still retain your comradeship, although you are much more in the market now than in public, ownership of things. Mr. Epo posed a question to him about how labor issues have been managed in Georgia. And I found that question to be extremely value-loaded. It assumes that labor is an obstacle. It assumes that labor blocks reforms. I think maybe, I'm not sure the response of Michael to this question. But we can't do justice to that question until we ask the workers in Georgia how they managed Michael when he was in power, so that we can have a balanced view properly. But the point I want to raise here is that the trade union movement, for those of us who are in the world of work, and there are a lot of captains of industry here who have managed enterprises. I listened to, although we couldn't pick the message, but the MD of Tata, who spoke all the way from India. I know Tata is a group of companies, and they all come from a background in which the enterprises have workers that are organized and they are trade unions. Good captains of industry will know that trade unions are also agents of reform in many respects. If you cultivate workers very well, they can become good partners in development, because you need to motivate them for productivity. And the real battle is that after we have generated wealth, how do we share in a way that you don't really, ignore the interests of labor? So I want to make the point that we are strong advocates of reform. And the history of our Nigeria shows that. If you check all the major changes that have happened in Nigeria, whether from the struggle against colonialism to independence, the struggle from military to democracy, which gives us this platform, of seeing the good effort that have been carried out in Lagos State, trade unions have been the vanguard of that change. Even at a time some other forces could not see it, we try as much as possible to make case for reform. And we believe strongly in what Nelson Mandela said, that the possibility of renewal and change is the defining moment, the characteristics of politics, economy, and even religion. Mandela is very clear about that the possibility of renewal, because that's what reform is all about, that change is constant, we need to support change, and we should be able to manage it better. So I want to say that we've come here, as workers who are organized, who are also part of the process of change. And on electricity, power supply is not just partial commitment. For us in trade union movement, it is total commitment. Because without electricity, there cannot be industrialization. And if there is no industrialization, there can't be development. You can't do any production without power supply. And we are interested in jobs. We can't even get jobs if the enterprises are not there. I grew up in Nigeria, and again, maybe this is the missing link in our narrative. It's easier to go to Georgia, to go to Singapore. I think if you also look at our history, we have enough experiences to copy on. I grew up in a Nigeria in which I never knew power supply. That was in the 60s, 70s, and up to even mid-80s. In fact, when I was in secondary school, they used to beat us to put off light. There used to be light-out period. There is a period in which you must put off the light. I also grew up in a Nigeria in which the manufacturing value added in this country was as high as about 25%, on the average. Now we are just less than 4%. The whole industrial estate, great industrial estate of Ikeja, Ilupeju, Sharada in Kano, Kakuri in Kaduna, Trans-Hamadi in Port Harcourt, Aba, those were real industrial estates being propelled by uninterrupted power supply. And I came from textile background. I've been there for almost about 25 years. In the 70s up to early 80s, you can't have plants, being run based on generators. We are dedicated power supply. So electricity is the key. And the story is completely different today. And one of the greatest failure factors that completely undermine industry in this country is collapse of electricity sector. And now, from uninterrupted power supply, we now have enterprises that are being run by generators, and the cost of diesel extremely very high. I read through some of the statistics that Lagos State government gave yesterday. Even if government incurs such a cost on diesels, and the way they've saved on this cost, because now we now have independent power projects, that tells you the kind of crisis that manufacturers are going through in the private sector. So I want to say that we are one with government, and not just at the state level, within our federal level, in terms of the need for power sector reform. Now, the challenge is the nature of the reform. How do you carry out these reforms? And what is the content of that reform? And I thought this is the area that we can share from our colleagues from Georgia and others who have spoken for us from UK and India. Now, how do you correct 40 years of decay within 4 months, within 4 years? If you have cataract in your eyes, and which has really become matured enough for surgery, even your doctor's optician will tell you that you need to have some proper transition period. Otherwise, in an attempt to cure cataract, you may actually damage the sight. I think the issue is what will be our approach to reform. Is it going to be a shock therapy, or it has to be gradual? In a way that will move properly, to arrive at where we are going. And I'm raising this point because just last month, President Jonathan gave a marching order to all the investors for them to make sure they improve on power supply by June. And this is because of the sharp drop in power supply immediately after the privatization. I think this raises the issue of spacing of reform. There are a lot of issues that have been raised, and I listened to Funke very well, who said there are a lot of issues that have not been addressed. Now, if those issues have not been addressed, why rushing, this reform in a way that you are back to square one again? Because I thought that once you are privatized to giving it to investors, government doesn't have to be giving matching order as if we are back to the same old bureaucracy that we were running before. I think the challenge is how do we space reform in a way that we don't go from one step forward and many steps again backward. And the other quick point I want to raise is that we talk of private sector, public sector. It's fine, but in the real world of work, I think it's difficult to have this binary, division between the private and the public. And I think Nigeria has a way of moving from one pillar to another post, which I think is not really helpful. I think we should get it clear. Whether private sector or public sector approach to energy service delivery, they are all the means, they are not the end. And I think it's important we interrogate each of these means and find out which of these means is useful for us so that we can get proper results. I say so because you can see when we are sitting down there, as a matter of fact, I never had most of the comments that were raised being transmitted to us. And I had to come down here, and I can see that I could hear very well. For those of us who are panelists, the way the public address has been arranged, we are not hearing for obvious reasons. And by the time I came down, the difference is clear. That by the time I left the privatized sector on the high table, and I moved to the public sector, I could hear what is being said. The point I'm raising here is that, you see, we cannot pigeonhole ourselves. What is clear is that we want to communicate, we want to dialogue. And since I couldn't get any reception there, it doesn't make sense to me. I move on here, and I listened to what the last speaker said. So we can't mistake the means for the end. And we can see from Lagos State what has been done. That you don't have a kind of dogmatic approach to the need to generate power. I was just asking my very good friend, Ben Akagweze, the Commissioner for Economic Planning, how did you get this done, in Lagos? The fact that now you light up schools, hospitals, and the beauty of your project is that it's also classless, because Lagos government has been accused of being concerned more with the rich. I think with power supply, you have no choice, because even the street lights, those of us who ride Molue, we enjoy the light. But it is through the private public sector arrangement. It's a joint approach, and I think it's led by the government. And I'm so excited that within this short time, you've generated this enough megawatts in which now you light up hospitals and go. So I want to make a point that we must, as much as possible, break this binary approach that is that public or private. I've told you before, in our history, we had uninterrupted power supply, public sector. Of course, it failed. It reached a point in which investment is low, it's poorly managed. We are moving to another one. I think maybe the truth is in between for us to do the blending. Now, quick one on the labor issues. I think the labor issues, let me round up. I'm rounding up now. On the labor issues, labor issues are diverse. But the basic one is that you must, first of all, recognize the trade unions for what they are. That they are not advisory, they are partners. So if you are an investor, as the workers recognize you, also recognize them as partners in progress. And you should create forum for us to have proper dialogue. All the issues can definitely be resolved. Then the ownership, because if you look at privatization law, there is even a provision that some workers should buy shares of this enterprise. It's time for us to implement that clause, because once we become owners, it's also easier for us to manage very well. Then you need to do proper retraining, of the new workers so that they can get brought to the new the challenge and listen to Funke very well. And I think there are a lot of more enlightenment that we can do. Then lastly, labor people are also consumers. We're also interested in service delivery, and a situation in which the new investors are eager to charge more fees, tariffs, rather than delivering services will not be appropriate for us. I think it's important that let's see what we are paying for. In recent time, you have high tariffs, yet no power supply. And we are still using our generators, yet we pay tariff, it's double jeopardy. So labor issues are also consumer and Nigerian issues. But on a final note, and I listened to Funke very well, what are we even privatizing? Or what are we talking about? 3,000 megawatts, at the best of time, 4,000 megawatts. Nigeria cannot grow as an economy. We can't be part of 20 leading economy with this miserable mega supply. So you now discover that all of us need to work together, not just labor management, not all federal and state government. We must generate enough power, in a way that we can drive Nigeria. And in that case, labor issues become federal government issue, it becomes Lagos state government issue, it becomes all of us. Labor issues are Nigeria issues. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Okay, so we have Engineer Taufik Tijani, Commissioner for Energy and Mineral Resources, Lagos State, following Comrade Aremu, and then we'll go straight to the audience. But just a quick one on the very, very welcome comments by Comrade Aremu about partnership, which is a big takeaway for me. Two things I'll say quickly. When I was working in the BPE 14 years ago or so, 2001, I didn't feel that we were partners because just 60, 70 meters away from this hall, I had a whole bunch of electricity workers in a room like this surrounding me and about to tear me apart because I brought the message of we need to change this, the way we run our businesses. But thankfully, that has changed. Second thing I'll say very quickly is to let you know out there that our partners, the labor unions, appear to be the very first beneficiaries of reform because the entire proceeds of what were paid by Mrs. Oshibodu and the rest of her colleagues, the co-investors, was paid straight over to them as a severance benefits and all that. So they have got a very big payout already, and we can see that reform is really working for our partners. So it's very nice for them, but we will then have to fund the rest of the investments. Second thing is that, unfortunately, none of them came back to say, we actually want to have the money stay with you so that we get shares in exchange. So I'm not sure whether the opportunity to buy those shares has actually not already passed them by. But, I'm sure there'll be more of that in the future. we'll now ask Engineer Tijani to please round up the panel discussions for us, and then we will go to the audience to get a few questions.
Lagos State, and I'm happy the chairman said that in his opening remark about how some people want to slow down the transition and some people want to make it happen quickly. I would say Lagos State is in that position to make it happen quickly. We have demonstrated that in several ways. And I must say, we've been blessed to have visionary leaders. As far back as 1980, the first civilian governor, the Alhaji Lateef Jakonde, established Lagos State Electricity Board. The purpose of that board at that time was to generate and distribute electricity. Even though we never had the opportunity to do that, but they were able to procure a lot of electrical infrastructures, which actually helped us at that time to open up all those rural areas, putting in feeder pillars, transmissions, stations, and all the rest of it, which the agency, either ECN or NEPA, were able to go there and energize. And more recently, another visionary leader, Mr. Babatunde Raji Fashola SAN, established a Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources. It's part of this scheme to help smooth out the transition process. And I must say, the issues we've been talking about, we talk about generation issues. And most of the time we talk about gas supply, we talk about vandalism. On gas supply, the government of Lagos State is also promoting a way to do an alternate source of fuel supply. And we've been promoting the use of LPG, liquefied petroleum gas. Today, we have over 2 to 3 million meters of LPG being exported out of this country. Although they have really dedicated some quantum for Nigeria. But the issue is, do we use it appropriately? So Lagos State is trying to champion a situation where we can use LPG rather than waiting on those gas that will be going through the pipeline and be vandalized. So we can bring in LPG to our shore. We are lucky we're on the coastal area. We can bring it in and let it subsidize most of those fuel that we need for our generation. Also on the distribution, as you know, we as a state, we are also a stakeholder in the distribution companies here in the state, both ECO and Ikeja Disco. The governor himself and officials of government have engaged the owners of the discos. We've gone through all those issues, the transition issues that we've been talking about, land matters, physical planning issues, right-of-way issues, environmental, security. All those ones have been smoothed out. And I must say, with due respect to Mr. Eyo, that we are the local municipal regulator here. And we'll make sure we do it appropriately. Also, we've used our agency, the Lagos Electricity Board, to generate data, which will actually assist most of the distributor companies to take off. Also, quickly, we are doing some kind of a stopgap because we know most of this power supply will take some time. And that's why the state has embarked on embedded distribution. That's why we have the 10 megawatts that we have in Marina. We have the 12 megawatts that's powering our water corporation in Akute. We have the 10 megawatts for our secretariat in Lausa. And as we speak, we are still hoping to put in place 8 megawatts in the mainland, in Ikeja, and another 6 in Lekki. By and large, all these places are supposed to be taken off grid to allow us, make power, available to other parts of the state. So, in all effect, I must say that just like the state of Georgia, we are up and doing. We are ready to move ahead, and I'm sure the transition issues will be easy for a state like Lagos State. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much, Engineer Tijani. Very short and very sharp. I think it is fitting that we started out with President Saakashvili and ended with Engineer Tijani, and they both essentially highlighted something that sometimes we tend to forget, but it's very present, which is the importance of political will in developing a reform program, in implementing it and seeing it through to the very end, despite all the ups and downs. And some might agree that part of the reason why our own reform program in Nigeria has taken us through the last 14 years is that there has been an ebb and a flow in the strength of that political will. And you've seen progress when it is strong. And of course, you've seen stagnation when it disappears. And I think that's the point that they both have made very, very critically for us today.
Now we're going to go for questions, which will be streamed online. So the first question apparently is for Mr. Fernstone. What kind of support is the World Bank offering Nigeria's privatized power sector?
To be very short, we offer two types of support. Direct investment funding, primarily for the transmission company of Nigeria. We have an ongoing portfolio of roughly 200 million under implementation now. Those would be bricks and mortar investments such as substations, capacity improvements, transformers, etc. We have also in the past funded metering when the distribution companies were in public hands. And those of you that live in Abuja might actually have benefited from some of our interventions there. The second part is guarantees, which I mentioned in my speech, which is really where the private sector comes in. The guarantees is meant to bolster confidence for investments and fast-track investments in different parts of the electricity chain, starting with greenfield IPPs, bringing in new generation to feed the Nigerian power sector. So we are bringing the two first transactions in the next couple of months, and there are more to come on that. Thank you.
What is the situation with the interim rules, and when, in the opinion of the NERC, do you think this will be resolved? This is, as you surely are aware, is a cause for concern for the new owners of the PHCN Gencos. This is by Tolu Awuyifa.
The question speaks to the fact that at the moment, the generating companies do not have contracts in force with the distribution companies because, of course, as we all know, the distribution companies took over their discos in a state in which revenues were not adequate. So we have this thing we call the interim rules. Now, the interim rules we expect, projected, they should be out, and we will then have contracts in effect by the third quarter of this year at the latest. That's our expectation. But it is dependent, and this is very important, it is dependent on certain things being done by all of us, not just NERC, not just discos, but also generating companies, all of us together. And if you are speaking from the GENCO perspective, I'm sure you would know what these things are. I don't want to go into them, but there are certain conditions precedent that we all agree need to be done. What NERC is doing is just trying to force the discos, the generating companies, but particularly the discos who have the biggest function to carry out, and TCN, to get those things done so that we actually move into those contract stages at the earliest opportunity. So that's what I'll say for now on that question.
The next question is actually for Mrs. Oshubudu. It says, how soon do you think that the transition will yield the desired positive results from an investor's perspective, considering your huge investment into power? This is by Wole Apata.
I think generally all investors in the power sector expect that returns will not be a short-term process. Typically, we all expect major investments to take place within the first 5 years, and then you start seeing the returns. So I mean, talking for our own disco, I don't expect anything in any significant way before 4 to 5 years. But there are many things that need to be done up front to make those a reality. For most places, the least you will expect is after 3 years, basically in terms of from an investor perspective. But we all expect to invest first and then expect returns later. And investments are largely capital investments. And to make those capital investments, the structure must be viable, because those capital investments come in two forms. Facilities or loans from financial partners and your own generated investments. for both, you expect to be able to have a structure that makes sure that there's a balance in a way that the consumers or customers pay for the electricity. Right now, for the whole sector, you have anything between 40 and 60% leakage. That is losses in that sector. So if there's no restructuring, those investments won't come in. If they don't come in, then the horizon is longer. And those are part of the structural things that are being addressed upfront now, so as to make sure that those realities come in. Maybe I should also use this opportunity to highlight that for a lot of us here in the crowd, and including myself, we do not realize that we are also part of the leakages. A lot of us, for lack of better word, either steal or divert power without realizing we are doing so. And there are many leakages within the system. So there's a need for a lot of education so that we all assist the system in working better.